Whai o tunu ko te uranga o te rā ki ngā hua nui o te ikaroa rāwhiti. E tau mai ai ko te kupu ko te kōrero o te ao tōranga pū. E tau mai nei. The Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate extends from the top of East Cape down to the north of the Wellington region. It has over 36,500 registered voters and in the 2020 election had a turnout of just over 67%. This is one of the tightly, hotly contested electorates. It's the Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate debate, Te Pōtitanga 2023. E ngā mate pūrara I te motu whānui haramai haere. Tātou ngā mahuetanga I hoa rātou māti hewa mauri ora, and welcome to this debate with the leading candidates of the Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate. They are live in studio now, so let's introduce them now. She is the candidate for the Labour Party, Heuri no Ngāti Porou Te Tai Rāwhiti, Kushla Tangaere-Manuel, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
And she is the sitting MP of the electorate, representing the Māori Party, Heuri no Rongo Whakata, me Ngāti Kaungunu, me ka whaitiri, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
The Honourable me ka whaitiri,
tēnā koe.
No mai rā kōrua. Tēnā rā kōrua. Thank you both for coming to Tāmaki Makaurau, for allowing us to drag you all the way to Tāmaki Makaurau from Ikaroa Rāwhiti. Now, as usual, we have undertaken what we're calling a sacred process of rock, paper, scissors to see who would speak first tonight, to make their 1-minute introduction. And we turn to you now, Meka Whaitiri, tēnā koe.
E te iwi o Ikaroa Rāwhiti, tēnā koutou. The undecided voters of Ikaroa Rāwhiti will decide who will be their representative in Parliament. I'm standing proudly as the candidate for Te Pāti Māori and seek your candidate vote and your party vote. Why? Because we need a different approach. Sitting at the table and getting pūtea crumbs is now over. We need a strong party and a strong voice for you to represent us in Parliament. There is real life crisis with our whānau. We are dying younger in our own country. We're homeless, we're incarcerated, and we're also in state care. That's not good enough. Te Pāti Māori has the policies that will eliminate poverty, that will enhance the life of our rangatahi, look after our kaumātuas, unlock the 700 billion Māori economy. This is a party for change. This is a party for us. It's up to the voters of Ikaroa Rāwhiti because Labour is polling so poorly and we need a strong voice in Parliament. So vote Meka Whaitiri, vote Te Pāti Māori. Mauri ora.
Tēnā koe Meka, mihi nui kia koe. Kushla Tangaere-Manuel, tēnā koe.
Ka tira, I raro I ngā manaakitanga e te rungarawa, tēnā tātou I ngā tini āhuatanga o te wā. Ko Kushla Tangaere-Manuel au, tō kai tono mo Ikaroa Rāwhiti mo te Pāti Reipa. Kia ora tātou, my name is Kushla and I'm privileged to be here as your candidate for Ikaroa Rāwhiti. I'm someone who likes to bring life to aspirations, and that's exactly my intention as your MP of Ikaroa Rāwhiti. In the time I've had as candidate, about 3 months or so, I've had the privilege of traversing our beautiful rohe and hearing the moimoia whānau have for their respective takiwa. I'm here to help whānau be a part of design to delivery in your own communities. Kei a koutou ngā whakautu ki ngā raruraru. You've got the solutions in you. Let me be your voice to execute them. Why Labour? We've got so much to build on, whānau. Average $1 billion targeted investment in kaupapa Māori. So I too am asking for 2 ticks. Party vote Labour, candidate vote Kushla Tangaere-Manuel. Kia ora tātou.
Kushla, tēnā koe, tēnā rā kōrua, ia kōrua whakapuakitanga mai. Our Hui reporters have been in every Māori electorate to get a sense of the issues that matter most to our people. Reporter John Boynton captures these issues from the people of Ikaroa Rāwhiti.
I was brought up here for 20 years. It was an awesome place to grow up. There was always a bed, there was always a boil up on the oven, and yeah, there was always aroha.
Kia ora, I'm John Boynton and I'm here in the Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate, which spans from the East Cape of the North Island down to the Wainui-o-Mata Valley in Wellington. And I'm here in Pāharakeke today to find out what are the issues that matter most to communities here.
I'd like to see a lot more involvement in kohanga reo, and seeing what kind of budget services there are to help those that are struggling.
Kaupapa for us is probably Māori housing. There's too many whānau not in their own homes. It's just getting everyone opportunities, just get introduced to those pathways. It could lead to something, whether professional or in time, a business.
Housing is our number one, and poverty. You know, taking care of our babies is so important. How our whānau meant to take care of their babies when they don't have a roof to put over their heads. I remember there was a whānau that slept under a slide with her baby and her 15-month-old. That absolutely broke my heart. It was things like that. They shouldn't be happening here in New Zealand at all, in Aotearoa. It should not be happening.
My concern really is for our kaumātua. We need more homes for our kaumātua, warm homes, and it worries me because, you know, housing is so expensive.
I think they need to come into the heart of where these things are happening and go around and see our whānau and talk to our whānau. Ka nohi ki te ka nohi.
One of the biggest things that the government need to support our people in is obviously the cyclone relief. So many whānau are homeless or they're living on top of one another.
For me, I'd say the inflation. The price of kai has just skyrocketed. So trying to get nutritionist kai is a real struggle. And just trying to put petrol in your car every week to get to where you need to go, to get to mahi, we feel as though we're just scraping and it's just like tooth and nail crawling there every single day.
Definitely the housing crisis. I feel like I don't really have dreams or aspirations for the future because I don't see it in sight.
You've got fully functioning families, 2 parents with a job, and they're still struggling. So you've got to imagine people with nothing now, and the single parents, it's pretty hard.
The people of the Hawke's Bay Ikarua Rāwhiti region have spoken, and they're still struggling with the consequences of Cyclone Gabrielle. Their big issues, housing and the increasing cost of living. So what are you going to do about it?
Pahara keke, tēnā koutou ngā iwi. O te rohe whānui Ikarua Rāwhiti, tēnā koutou katoa. We will discuss all of those issues tonight. But let's get into the issue that someone said was the main issue they wanted to raise. Housing. How are we going to fix housing and get more of our people living in their own homes, which was the aspiration talked about in that track? Mika Whaitiri.
Yeah, so Te Pāti Māori believes in building homes on ancestral land. So we've got a commitment to building 2,000 over 2 years. But what hurts me, Julian, is the fact that this government is spending almost $10 million per month in social housing in both Hawke's Bay and Te Tai-Rāwhiti. Just imagine if we were able to use that money to actually build homes and put into... We are propping up so many hotels, which I have to say are pretty dingy hotels in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. And we've got 50% of our Māori people on the social housing register. So we've got a solution of taking half of that money, putting it into our Māori communities and building homes on ancestral land.
Ka pai, and I will come back to some of those issues. Question Tangaere-Manuel, same question.
He mihi ki ngā kai kōrero katoa I runga I taua hōtaka, Julian. First of all, you know, if you're talking about social housing, some of those issues were things that we inherited and we acknowledge the only way to fix that is to build our way out of that, which we're committed to. And so an example is 730 million targeted funding to Māori housing last year. So we're seeing people building on papakainga, direct relationships with iwi for housing, you know, unprecedented stuff. And again, the feedback that we're getting from the iwi, it's not just about bricks and mortar, it's about reconnecting to the whenua. And because, you know, one of the saddest things I heard in that clip was people not daring to dream anymore. Those are the sort of things we want to talk about. That's the aspirational stuff. And seeing whānau move into their houses, that's changing things for generations.
How is it, and this is a question for both of you, that someone can be sleeping under a slide with their pepe for 15 months? Mika Whaitiri, the question to you. You've been the MP, you were in the government, I know you left, but you were in that government. How can that be?
Because of the policies that the government has, which is the social housing and the not enough housing supply and not thinking outside the square. So we're going to hotels And the challenge that we put our people, like this mother and her 15-year-old, to actually get on the social register, it already puts them at a disadvantage. Te Pāti Māori is going to honour all our whānau in need by ensuring that they've got the right support around them, and there are some really good advocates, both in Flaxmere and in the wider Ikaro Rāwhiti, who are doing a champion job.
How do you answer the accusation, though, that you supported that government for a long time, and that policy was there when you were actually the MP, you were a minister in that government, so therefore people will say to you and charge you with the accusation, hang on, you were there.
Yeah, I know, but now I've left because I've come home to my whakapapa because of the 15-year-olds and because the advocacy I've had for the people I represent has gone wanting with this Labour government, and that's why the decision to leave, to go back, to advocate for the 15-year-olds, to our Māori social providers who are doing an amazing job, is why we are here today.
Kusha Tangaere-Manuel, how do you handle that when people put that accusation to you? This government has failed, particularly in Ikaro Rāwhiti, when we hear comments like that.
There's a couple of things, Julian. One of the issues that has been raised as I've traversed the Ikaro Rāwhiti rohe is some of the processes that are in place, and that's why you saw the organisation in the background there. Those are the sorts of organisations we want to empower as a Labour government, and we've started making moves towards strong relationships with iwi. Why? Because they know their communities. They're more approachable to that mama. You know, highly likely that would have been more approachable. The second thing, in terms of me directly, what I can say to whānau, I can't take, accountability for things that have happened to date, but I'm here now. And if I am elected as the MP of Ikaro Rāwhiti, I'm here, I'll stay here, and then you can hold me to account.
Okay, so the final question then I just want to ask you particularly, the Labour government made a decision around emergency housing. Was that the wrong decision to make at that time because of the flow-on effects and the impacts of that decision?
Well, hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it, Julian? As with everything, people make the best decision they can at the time with what they have. The thing what I appreciate about the Labour government is nothing's a full stop. We're going to keep growing, we're going to keep learning and developing, and we're committed to that.
Tēnā korua i a korua whakautu. We've got a long time to debate all the issues that came up in that package. We will be talking about cyclone impacts and climate change after the break. Kia mautunu mai rā ingai, we have a lot more to discuss. And a question from the rohe after this. Ko tā tātou hui tēnei ngai wi e ata kōrero ane ngā take nui o toro he pōti o Ikaro Rāwhiti. We have the leading contenders from Ikaro Rāwhiti here tonight. From the Labour Party, Kusha Tangaere-Manuel, and from the Māori Party, Meka Whaitiri. Let's go now to the pātai from the electorate of Ikaro Rāwhiti. And this one comes from a CEO of a community trust in Flaxmere. Kia ata mā takitake ake rā tātou, kia ata whakarongo ake rā tātou.
Kia ora te whānau, my name is Lindsay Abbott. I reside in Pārekeke and I am the founder and CEO of One Voice Community Services Trust. Our whānau are still covered in silt. They get to see that all day, every day. They breathe it, they feel it, and people are even getting māwiwi from it because the silt still sits there. 6 months and 1 day later, it's still sitting there. They have lost everything in their homes. They are broken. Are you fighting for them? You be the voice for our people. Be the change, or you carry on doing what you're doing. Standing on one another's mana. Hurting one another. Just so that you can look good for 5 minutes. They need you to stand up and just get the mahi done. Stop worrying about your pieces of papers and all that sort of stuff. And he said, she said, work together and get it done because they need you now.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that pātai, and particularly for the mahi you're doing in the community with your rōpū ngā mihi nui kia koe. Let's get answers to your pātai now. Crucial Tangaere-Manuel, it's a direct challenge, right? How do you answer it?
Yeah, I'm big mihi to the whānau who e noho tonu ana I raro I te kapua pauri o aua taua āhuatanga. So the short answer is that we have invested heavily in silt removal, silt and debris. Clearly it's not enough for whānau. The Prime Minister was just back in the rohe approximately a week ago announcing another 12 million. We've already heard that they are going to need more, so that's under review. Like I said, Julian, I'm really sorry, it's never going to be fast enough for the whānau, and I acknowledge that e heka mā, but like I said, nothing's a full stop. We're not going to abandon people.
Meka, he pēha nei tō whakausi?
Well, from the day of the cyclone, Julian, 26 days on hop, I was in town. I was in Whakatū. I had whānau evacuate to my home. My priority was actually to go around to all the evacuation centres, to our maraes that open up their doors to help, before you could get out and see the extent of the damage that Lindsay's raised. I've been a strong advocate for the people of Hawke's Bay to get the resources. In fact, what's been the problem is the slowness of the government. It's been woeful, and because people have wanting and they're seeing, just like Lindsay said, and I see it every day when I drive through Pakawhai, that the silt is still there. So what the government needs to do is get the money and get out of the way, because the locals, both landowners, councils and iwi, have a solution. Okay. The government's just not listening.
Okay, so if you're the candidate over the next 3 years, how do you do that? Because the likelihood is, if you watch the polls, you won't be in government. You won't even be in a coalition government. So how do you do that and get rid of the silt quickly for the people?
Because I have a relationship with the National Party, if they're going to be the new government, because I've worked really hard with those ministers and those MPs that know the value of the work as a local MP working on the ground with our fruit growers and with our farmers. And I will continue to do that because I know people who will make those decisions, but I'll also present them with solutions which are led by the community and will actually help both the growers, the farmers and the community that have been impacted to get back on their feet.
Tangaere-Manuel, I know you mentioned the 12 million. Some might say not big enough, not fast enough.
That was another payment on top of the initial investment. And I just want to acknowledge, you have to be at the table to influence these decisions, and that's exactly what I'm committed to doing, Julian. All the key stakeholders, everywhere I've been, no matter what the kaupapa, people want that advocate at the table, and that's what I'm committing to.
Okay.
Here's the biggest issue, Julian, is that the people that are running the recovery don't understand whenua Māori. They do not understand the intrinsic value that we have with land, and my concern is that all the puti is going to dry up because general landowners will get first dibs and our Māori landowners will be left hanging, our maraes, our special places, and that's what I've been advocating for ages, to keep the door open and keep the putia full for when Māori go to that table.
But sometimes advocacy doesn't equal action, right? So how do you turn the action part, how do you make it quicker, faster, so that you get direct action immediately and as quickly as possible to those people?
Well, clearly that you've got to have influence both with the community, but also you don't have to always be the voice for that community. Our people can speak for themselves. What you've got to put them in front of people that make clear decisions. Okay. And that's what I've tried to do.
And that's what I have a track record of doing, Julian, is building relationships so that everyone involved can have a kōrero. And also that'll be my responsibility as the MP, is to help educate our non-Māori whānau about the value of whenua Māori.
If it's silt in that area of Ikaroa Rāwhiti, slash is a big issue in Te Tai Rāwhiti. So what are you going to do to deal with the slash issues and the future of forestry, because that continues to be an issue? Kusha Tangaere-Manuel.
Yeah, so again, we have made some investment in slash. It was really cool to be with the whānau of Toitu Tai Rāwhiti a week or so ago, looking at how they've started moving it out. Once again, of course they need further investment, and it was great to have Minister Jackson there to be party to those discussions and commit to not abandoning the whānau. That's really what they don't want to feel overlooked and left. What was the second part of your question?
Well, the second part of the question is, again, direct action, quick and fast, right? And the future of forestry in Te Tai Rāwhiti. Forestry certainly sped up after Cyclone Bola in 1988, right? So how do we deal with forestry going forward now? Because that's going to be an ongoing, lingering issue in the Rohe, right?
Yeah, so David, we know that we need to change some of the operational practices in the industry, and David Parker was in Gisborne today announcing new criteria that will be imposed after October. So requiring people to remove what's defined as slash, so certain perimeter and length must be removed from our forests.
Slash in Te Tai Rāwhiti, Meka Whaitiri, what's the solution from the Māori Party?
So from the Māori Party is we trust the landowners. There's many Māori that own forest up the coast, and it's easy for outsiders to say we need to stop forestry. Let's be very clear, on the coast through Bola, it was the Crown and the government of the day that incentivised the transition from sheep and beef farming into growing forests. So it's the Crown that needs to step up and actually transition them out. So Te Pāti Māori will back our Māori landowners, particularly our forest owners, for a solution that transitions them out from pine forests to permanent forests, and using carbon credits as a new way of bringing economic gain, because we've got some of the baddest land up the coast from classification 5 upwards. You can't do a lot with it.
Okay, let's talk about the wider climate change issue, because it seems like these climate emergencies are going to continue to happen, particularly in Ikaroa Rāwhiti. What's the response and the long-term response to ensure that our people can build resilient communities in Ikaroa Rāwhiti going forward, Meka Whaitiri?
Te Pāti Māori, clearly, we want to ensure that our people are speaking for themselves. We've got some amazing climate change champions up the East Coast that have known, and their kaitiaki role of looking after whenua and water has been overlooked by officials and successive governments. So Te Pāti Māori will back our local Māori communities who have actively protected waterways, and we will fund them to do that.
Ongoing climate emergencies, kusha Tangaere-Manuel and the Rohe.
First of all, we acknowledge that they exist. And, similarly, we know that our whānau Māori know their whenua and know the taiao. They need to be involved. Once again, Julian, from design to delivery, any future contracts, this is what I'm hearing from the people on the ground. We want to be involved in designing the new criteria for forestry moving forward. And there's many schools of thought. Some are saying, go 100% native now, but then there's also the school who know we have to transition so people stay in mahi in our communities.
Tēnā korua i a korua whakautu. Again, a lot more to discuss. We have more kaupapa here as a part of our Ikaroa Rāwhiti. Harai te tau tohe, he kōrero. He wānanga, he whakapua ki whakaaro. We have more on this hui Ikaroa Rāwhiti debate after this. Kia ora mai anō koe auraki mai koutou ki te pōtitanga 2023. Welcome back to this Ikaroa Rāwhiti wānanga, even though it says debate on my script. He wānanga kia. Let's talk about the cost of living. There was a point raised particularly about how we look after our kaumātua in Ikaroa Rāwhiti. What's your answer to that question when it came up in that track, Meka Whaitiri?
Removing GST of all kai. A national survey has said 67% of New Zealanders, or Aotearoa, actually support the removing of GST of kai. No taxes for those that earn under 30 $30,000 that will impact on our superannuates, our kaumātua. So those are two policies Te Pāti Māori are pleased to present to awhi our kaumātua.
How do you make sure, for GST of all kind, how do you make sure that that benefit ends up in people's pockets and doesn't end up being a plaything for the duopoly of the major supermarket owners?
Well, I would supplement our removing GST with our tax policy. So I've mentioned removing 30,000, but I also talk about our kai sovereignty. So we're supporting kai sovereignty, using land, using land from council, but actually trying to help our whānau grow community gardens as a way of supporting kaumātuas, particularly in addition to removing GST of kai.
Supporting our kaumātua, kusha Tangaere-Manuel.
Nui taku aroha ki ngā pakeke, Julian. Hoi anō, a couple of things we're doing, you know, keeping the super age at 65, thereby actually protecting 2 years of income for them. There's actually been an increase in super, which gives a couple about $320 extra a fortnight in their pocket and about $180 for a single pakeke, protecting the energy payment. And also, you know, something that's happening now that's sort of future-proofing for our pakeke as well is some of the emergency homes will eventually become kaumātua flats on our marae.
You didn't mention the cut you're making to GST off some fruit and veg. That's a policy that your leader has talked about, and all of a sudden it seems to have gone away from the narrative of the Labour Party. Why is that? Is that because you've been usurped and gazumped a little bit by the Māori Party with their policy?
Kaore ro atu. I actually only didn't bring that one up because it doesn't specifically apply just to pakeke. I was just talking about things specifically to kaumātua.
Okay, and so the other thing that I want to follow up on is around petrol prices, right? So our kaumātua still drive. They've got to drive to hui, mate, sit on the taumata to do the karanga, all that kind of thing. How do we tackle the petrol price increases that we have seen, huge increases in New Zealand recently?
Well, one of the ways, obviously, is we're trying to transition out of that. So we've got subsidies for electric and hybrid vehicles. I actually drive a hybrid, and I know some people think that, you know, they're all in the upper end of the market, but you can actually get a reasonable second-hand hybrid now or electric vehicle. So that's one of the key ways.
So Te Pāti Māori also have subsidies to encourage, but we also know it's very expensive to own an electric vehicle, but slowly it's coming down. But we're going to introduce free transport, free public transport to all people, and that will help get our kaumātuas around. I know in some of our communities there are no public buses, but we want to acknowledge that in places like Hawke's Bay, Gisborne, that we would want to encourage our kaumātua to use free public transport.
How would you respond to the Labour Party that will say, OK, so you want to take all GST off all kind, you also want a wealth tax, you've just talked about public transport. How is that affordable given inflation is over 8% now in the country?
It's our tax policy, Julian. We've got a very, very disruptive, transformative tax policy. We're going after the wealthy because we believe that they can pay more. We're also going to go and put a tax on our vacant homes so we can bring more of the supply in. We're also going to alleviate the stress on many of our whānau by reducing income tax. There's about $7 billion of tax avoidance in this country, so we're going to ensure this, the Serious Fraud Office is well-resourced to chase them. So there are people getting away because they're hiding them in trust, and Te Pāti Māori is the only party that's putting up an innovative, a transformative tax policy that will bring in income and that we can support all the policies and fund all the policies Te Pāti Māori have said that they will do.
You've heard the policies here from the Pāti Māori kusha Tangaere-Manuel. What do you say to those that Labour just hasn't been bold enough in the way in which it can help directly our whānau of Ikaroa Rāwhiti with some of the policies that they're talking about, like the wealth tax, which Labour considered didn't do?
Yeah, because there's other ways we can put money in people's pockets, Julian, like the free prescriptions, you know, and that's, again, I didn't bring it up in pakeke because it's not specifically relevant to them. Increasing early childhood payments. Spoke to a mama the other day, she was like, that's another $120 in her pocket a week, and that's nothing to turn your nose up at. Free school lunches, over 100 million served, and that averages about $33 per child per week. So if you've got a whānau, that all adds up.
Yeah, the other point I was going to raise, again, not specifically about kaumātua, but for our whānau, Te Tairāwhiti is a region that has a lot of kai. Now, I know there has been impact on aquaculture and the like because of what's happened with slash, particularly around the coast in Te Tairāwhiti. But how is it that our whānau are going hungry when Te Tairāwhiti has a fruit bowl and has been a kāpata kai for the country? Kusha Tangaere-Manuel.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question we all ask ourselves, right? And that's actually something that I'm personally interested in looking into. But we have to remember, you mentioned inflation, Julian, and that's not always under our control. The thing is, we are trying to address it with a multifaceted approach, not just a one answer fit all.
And for Te Pāti Māori, we just trust in our people, our communities, who know our people better than anything. They also know their tai ao. They know what's possible. They know what needs to happen. So we want to back our Māori communities, our hapori Māori, throughout the electorate, who have been constantly coming up with ways to make sure that we're meeting the cost of living. They're just not listened to.
Mika Vaitiri, you said you're going to advocate on behalf of your people if you are the candidate for Ikaroa Rāwhiti. Remember the National Party, and you mentioned the National Party specifically. The National Party has ruled you out. Yep. They do not want to work with you. Yep. How are you going to make that work if you're in opposition?
Here's the lesson about being an MP for the last 10 years, is that relationships with whoever's in government is so critically important, because at the end of the day, governments are there to govern for all. What I bring is that experience of actually cutting through the chase, because I have relationships with a lot of ministers and MPs in Parliament, because at the end of the day, you want to be the best person advocating for your people. So knowing people, knowing solutions and delivering is the key.
Kusha Tangaere-Manuel, if you are successful and you are the candidate for Ikaroa Rāwhiti after the election, how are you going to advocate strongly for your people when the accusation is that the Labour Party is not a Māori sovereign party, it has Pākehā leadership, and you will be potentially in opposition after the election? How are you going to make it work?
I think, first of all, the important point that's been raised and that our whānau need to consider is that we need a Labour government, because we don't want to just go in and fight and just be fighting. We want to, I mean, of course, but my message at the moment is we need to build on what we already have, whānau. So let's do it from the front foot and make sure Labour get in as government. Hoi anō ki tō pātai tuarua. Well, that's why I've been asked to stand in this candidacy, Julian, because actually I've been running ko te whakaaro I roto i au, ko e tipu area. Tō ringa ki ngā rākau e te Pākehā, hei oranga mo tō tirana, engari ko tō ngākau ki ngā taonga o tipona Māori. You know, traversing both worlds is something that comes naturally to me. And I know the responsibility that comes with being the MP for this rohe, and that's what I've committed to.
Tēnā koro I a kuru a whakautu, tai noa mai ki tēnei wā. We have more after this with part 4 of this discussion with the leading candidates. We talk about aspirations for the rohe of Ikaroa Rāwhiti a tai hoa ake nei. Ko huri te aro o tātātou hui I aia nei ki ngā mahi turuapo e te tiro whakamua I tātou. We are here with the leading candidates of the Ikaroa Rāwhiti electorate. Me ka whaitiri from Te Pāti Māori, Kusha Tangaere-Manuel of Te Pāti Labour. And I want to talk about aspiration, and I want to talk about the aspirations you both have for Ikaroa Rāwhiti if you are the candidate, if you are the MP, aroha mai, after October the 14th. Kusha Tangaere-Manuel, what's your big aspiration for the people of Ikaroa Rāwhiti?
You know, in one of the recent surveys, it was really actually quite heartening to see how many of our tāne were concerned about employment. You know, because, you know, when you have a purpose and you're fulfilling it and you feel productive, ka whai oranga koe, whai mahi, whai oranga. So that's what I want to see. I want to see gainfully employed people, not just in big industry. The dreams we talked about, I want to see whānau having and realising their moi are, so encouraging entrepreneurship. Obviously, hopefully we won't be talking about housing anymore because, you know, whai kāinga, whai oranga. That's also another one of our big kaupapa. So people living well, independent, free lives.
Sovereignty. We want to take care of ourselves, and to do that, I want to see in Ikaro Rāwhiti our Māori economic economy come to play. Our fishing, our forestry, our farming, our food producers. We grow beautiful kai in our electorate by beautiful people, and I'm seeing slowly our settled iwi, our land trust playing an active role in the primary industry. So I want to see that blossom. I want our people to be employed. I want them to be paid a living wage and therefore own their own homes. That's my aspirations, and I believe we can do it by 2040.
Let's talk about 2040 then. It's actually only 17 years away, which when you think about it is really quick. What will the Ikaro Rāwhiti electorate look like in 2040, Meka Whaiti?
Well, I'd see signage all across the Ikaro Rāwhiti in Te Reo, mita that comes from each tribe and each hapu. I would see our kura kaupapa, our kohangas thriving. I'll see wānanga. I'll see our own iwi research institute based in Ikaro Rāwhiti, because we've got a lot to offer off our primary industries. We'll get investments overseas, because I've travelled overseas and a lot of people want to come here and invest in partnership with Māori. So there'll be some huge opportunities that I see happening where we are looking after our own assets.
Kusha.
Through the results of the whai kāinga, whai oranga, we'll see our takiwa rebuilt. That's something I'm really passionate about. I live in Rangitukia because I choose to, because I'm from there. And those of us who don't live here yet, live at home yet, want to move back someday. So we need to repopulate our regions, get our schools full, so that our tamariki tipu ake I tō rātou ake reo, me ngā tikanga, gainfully employed, and also to encourage entrepreneurship, Julian. We're very entrepreneurial people. So not just, like I said, not just focusing on big industry, but building the tangata, the whānau, the hapu and the iwi.
This has been a different election campaign, it feels like. It really feels like, and I haven't felt this way since 2005 actually, that Māori have become a big political football in this particular campaign. And actually there's been some direct attacks against, for example, in your party, Hana Rāwhiti might be Clark, and in your party, Nanaia Mahuta. And those are just some examples, and I know that would have happened elsewhere. And I just want to talk a little bit about what you both think about that and how we can change that tone of this election campaign in the future.
We've just got to call it out. We've got to call it out when we see it. We've got to be bold, and we've got to hold people accountable for that. But we've also got to show that that's not Aotearoa. You know, we can have differences, just like our marae. And that's why Te Pāti Māori talks about he Aotearoa hau. It's just like our marae. We'll welcome you, we'll love you, we'll feed you. And so those issues that you've raised, Julian, can be dealt with in a very Māori way, because we've got to hold true to our values. We may differ, but we respect that everyone has their views, and that's how we would deal with that.
This is your first campaign. Gee, what a first campaign to come into. But again, your view, I mean, it feels like these attacks, particularly for wahine Māori, have been direct and hard. And I just want to know how you think we should be dealing with that as a nation going forward.
You're not the first to ask about this, Julian. And one of the things I said about the parties who are raising it, I'm pleased because we've got the right to know. Our people deserve to know, so they haven't been lulled in to a false sense of security with these parties that say, you know, by saying they're going to work with us, they're going to work with all because we're all the same, etc. So in that sense, I'm pleased. In terms of the wahine Māori kaupapa, I come from the place where all our wharenui are named, all but one are named for wahine Māori, for our tipuna Māori. And when I started in New Zealand rugby, I was the only female CEO or chair. So as a wahine Māori, I think it's about being in those spaces, and Nanaia talked about it too, and not being chased out of them easily. So going in there and being the sort of people that repel that sort of behaviour and challenge it, and make those spaces safe, not just for wahine Māori, rangatahi Māori, everyone, you know, and that's also our responsibility as tangata whenua, is to make spaces safe for everyone.
And our tāne Māori need to also step up to and tautoko us.
Tika. Engari, tēnā koru I era whakautu. Tēnā koru. I want to now give you the opportunity to make some closing comments, your final pitch, because I think this is your last debate before you go back home for the campaign to the elections on October the 14th. So your final 45-second kōrero to the rohe. We'll start with you, Kushla.
Tēnā nō koutou ngā kaipōti o Ikaroa Rāwhiti. Tēnā au tō poronga e mihi atu kia koutou. You know, as I've been traversing Ikaroa Rāwhiti, there have been some key messages. You want someone that's going to show up, you want someone that's going to listen, and you want someone who's going to follow through. In the short run-in, I've done all those things to demonstrate that I am genuinely here to serve you. And kaua e maharahara, people have said, oh, but you're Ngāti Porou, can you serve the whole electorate? Let me guarantee you, if I let you down, I let my people down. Nā rere tēnei au, I'm asking you for your support. I'm not on the list whānau. The only way to get me to Parliament as your waha kōrero is to vote for Kushla. So I'm asking for 2 ticks. Party vote Labour, candidate vote Kushla Tangaere-Manuel. Push for Kush, because I'll push for you.
Tēnā koe hoa. Uhuri atu ki a koe I nei meka.
Tēnā koe, Julian. Well, I said at the beginning, it'll be up to our undecided voters of Ikaroa Rāwhiti who they choose as their candidate. Kushla has presented herself. She is new, as she has said, and she belongs to a party that is currently polling poorly. I am someone that's experienced, who loves the electorate, who knows the electorate, who has delivered strongly for the electorate. And I've got the passion for the job to represent you. But I'm also part of a party that is unapologetically Māori, that they will defend your rights as Māori. We will defend kaupapa Māori. We will defend whakapapa, whenua and whānau. There's only one party that will deliver to you, our people of Ikaroa Rāwhiti, and that's Te Pāti Māori. So I'm asking you for candidate vote, Meka Whaitiri, to send an experienced MP back to Parliament to represent you, and Te Pāti Māori, because it is about tino rangatiratanga. It is Māori, mana motuhake, mauri ora koutou.
Tēnā kōrua. Push for Kush, pōke ka whameka. Pōke ka whameka, push for Kush. Tēnā kōrua, tēnā kōrua. I just think it's awesome that Ikaroa Rāwhiti has 2 awesome candidates. Kaitono putting up their hands for the rohe. Ngā mihi nui kia kōrua. Thank you for allowing us, as I said, to drag you all the way to Tāmaki Makaurau, only for the both of you to have to go back home. Apopo. Tēnā kōrua, ia kōrua. Mahi, kia hātia e ngai iwi kua painga ngā kōrero a ngā kaitono o Ikaroa Rāwhiti I konei. We wish both our candidates, Meka Whaitiri from Te Pāti Māori and Kushla Tangaere-Manuel from the Labour Party, all the very best for the election. We wish you also, the rohe, the very best in making your decision. Ko te mea nui e puta ki te pōti. Get out and vote. Early voting is open now. Coming up next, our experienced experts of evaluation with excellence, Shane Tapo and Mani Dunlop, are here after the break. Kua mimiti te puna kōrero o ngā kaitono, e rangi kua toto te puna kōrero o ngā pukinga. Join us now are our political savants. Former broadcaster, do you like that word, savants? Yeah, I just made it up. It's not even in the script. Now communications, former broadcaster, now communications expert, Marnie Dunlop, and professional raconteur and political commentator, Shane Tapo. No digs this time, Shane. No mai korua. Tēnā korua. Thank you both again for being a part of our panel. So good to have you both. Again, let's start with overall comments and review of performance, that kind of thing, Marnie.
Of course, what I'm a hikaro rāwhiti is up for grabs. We've known that, especially since, when Kushla was announced as the candidate, and that was a good get for the Labour Party considering the time frame that they had. I mean, in that debate, we saw both of their strengths. Mika is seasoned, and she has obviously, been mentored and was mentored by the late Parikura Horomia, and her style of politics is like that, on the ground, going to Odahui, going up the coast, any road that she's on, she's stopping into every house to have a cup of tea with an auntie or an uncle or the cousins. And so, and that kanohi kitia for Māori is so key. And for Kushla, she's known on the coast, as we know, Ngāti Porou rugby, and much of the mahi that she has done, at the roots rugby level. But in terms of the rest of the electorate, she has been working really hard to be on the ground as well in places that she won't be as known in the Hawke's Bay, or Hawke's Bay, I'll get in trouble for saying the Hawke's Bay, or down further into Wainui or Mata. So, no, yes, it is up for grabs, and we've seen in polling from Whakaata Māori that it is neck and neck.
Shane.
Well, I think that Kushla has made a race of this. I would have thought, some 4 or 5 months ago that it was Mecca's at an easy jog. This is one seat to watch. I think you're quite right, Marnie. It's hard to believe that Kushla is a first-term candidate some 6-7 weeks ago. Yeah. But also I thought Mecca was absolutely right to recognise undecided voters, because I think that's where this seat and other Māori seats will be won or lost. I still think some 3 or 4 months, or maybe even 6 months after leaving the Labour Party, that Mecca really has not defined in a really coherent way why she has left the Labour Party, and she can't divorce herself from 9.5 years of being a senior member of not only the party, but for a short period cabinet and outside of cabinet.
Yeah. Do you think that's why the undecided part is so big? Is because whether she likes it or not, Mecca is still semi-attached, to Labour and Labour government, particularly over the last 2-3 year terms. And Kushla is very much attached because she's the Labour Party candidate. But it's a different kind of race.
I think the large... No, I don't. My analysis is that's not why the undecided vote is so big. By and large, in Māori seats, Māoris don't make up their minds until the last week or two. And the other thing is, I think that undecided sometimes also transforms to not voting and turnout issues. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit later in our kōrero, but turnout's going to be a big issue.
I just want to pick up on that around, when Mecca did leave, and you asked about the Cyclone recovery. She was holding the leading ministerial role for that. But I think when you delve a bit deeper and you kind of look broader at what was happening at that time, she wasn't being given the adequate resources in order to fulfil that role as Minister for Cyclone Recovery. She was kept outside of Cabinet, and others were put in front of her when she had done what she was told she had to do in order to earn back the trust of the party. And so the writing was on the wall, and you can read in between the lines of what was said at the time when she left that, quite frankly, she wasn't being valued or respected from her perspective.
The Labour Party said as much. Willie Jackson said as much.
Yeah, and I get that. But the other positive thing about Mecca, I think she's actually become a better communicator since she's left the Labour Party. Maybe there's just a level of personal freedom where she can be herself.
And
what we've seen not only on this debate, but I've moderated debates, I think we've seen a lot more confident, coherent and forthright Mecca Whaitere.
You both talked about Kushla Tangaere-Manuel and her skills and attributes, and obviously her experience in Ngāti Porou rugby and obviously as a journalist as well. Let's not forget, a very good journalist. Is the fact that she's so tied to Te Tai Rāwhiti going to hamper her ability to be able to get votes in places like Te Matua Māui or even further south, going through Te Matua Māui, Wairarapa, all the way down to Wainui o Mata?
It's a very good point, Julian, because actually the reality is this seat is going to be won or lost in those big urban polling booths of Hastings, or of Napier, or Wainuiomata. Does she have the reach in those areas? Yeah, I think she does actually. Yeah, I do. I think she does. I think she's been out and about, but so does Mecca, and you'd have to give Mecca an advantage in those areas because name recognition is fundamentally important in politics.
Views?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree to some of what Shane has said, and I think that, you know, for Kusha, like you say, the last however many weeks that she was flung in, you know, she's done a pretty exceptional job and holding her own in those debates. I think, gosh, the number they gave us was in the dozens of the amount of debates that they've had to do on the ground and televised debates as well. So, again, I just go back to that first point, it is up for grabs, and we saw that as well just tonight on Whakata Māori, the poll for Hauraki Waikato. Sorry, I know we're on the hui, but I think important because
we're all whānau.
We're all whānau, so it's quite hard. But, you know, it's neck and neck for Nanaia Mahuta and Hana. Mai Pikak, 4%.
How can that be? Look, I'm not just talking about the result you've just given us from Whakata Māori, and as I said, we're all whānau. I mean, the way in which actually candidates engage are like whānau, and the way in which us Māori broadcasters engage is like whānau as well. We try and cover all of it. But how can it be that Labour is potentially, and I'll use these words, so unpopular in Māori electorates when you have the spectre of National Act with St Peters and David Seymour as a potential government?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that, and I'm not even sure if the premise of your argument is right, because you're showing that in Hauraki, which I would have thought would have been one of the last to go in terms of Labour holding on, but
we're eating our words tonight.
But a greater advantage for Labour in Ikoro-Rāwhiti using the same polling outcomes. And Te Tai Ahuru, I think the answer lays somewhere in between, and I just think that people haven't made up their minds, and there's still a lot to go in this race. Only 10 days to election day, but a lot to go.
And I think we all mentioned turnout could be an issue here. Now, Ikoro-Rāwhiti especially so, given the impacts of Cyclone Gabrielle, Cyclone Hale as well after that, you know, and the impact that that's had, and people not even being in homes and in safe and healthy homes, will they go out and vote? The access issues that already exist, will they go out and vote? Those kind of things. Do we think that's going to be a major issue here in Ikoro-Rāwhiti and generally, actually?
Absolutely. I really think that voter turnout is going to be a real struggle because, A, like Shane has said, people are really undecided. I think that people are becoming fatigued and withdrawn from this campaign. The division that's being created, people are just tapped out. And after COVID, after lockdowns, people don't want to consume this, as much as they have to. So I think, but also a lot of our vote, a lot of the Māori vote are rangatahi. So we have, I guess, like the hunters in the world, these mobilised and engaged rangatahi who are so political, but we have a whole other group of rangatahi who are not. So how do we engage them and how do we get them on board?
And the other factor is this. I think if you're generationally impoverished, if you haven't had a job, if your mother and father, your kaumata haven't had a job, it really doesn't matter who's in government, because they've seen Labour-led governments, national-led governments, coalition governments with Te Pāti Māori into it in terms of Tariana and Peter and John Key, lack of delivery for Māori. And I think a lot of our people have given up.
Yeah, and just quickly also, I think there's also a role for the Electoral Commission here, and we've seen time and time again in reports that we've seen that they are not catering to the needs of Māori and voter turnout, as well as ensuring our kura kaupapa, our marae, our places to vote as well. So how do we facilitate that?
Particularly in Ikoro-Rāwhiti with those cyclones that happened in March. There was time there to be able to do something to at least try and guarantee access and try and get turnout and all that kind of thing. That has to happen as well.
The thing is, in Aotearoa, you have to travel to polling booths. You look at places like Australia, where the polling booths will come to you, mobile polling booths. We just got to have better thinking.
I have to leave it there before Rewa tells me off. The only other thing I wanted to mention is, man, these Waina Māori candidates and these Māori electorates are flipping awesome.
Just get them all in, you know.
And the last thing any of them wants to do is, hang out with Jules for a night. So, and I think that goes for the panel as well. I'm sure that's what the panel told me. Let's take a look at, what are we doing now? Let's take a look at what's coming up, on the hui this week, later this week. Tomorrow, hei a pōpō tunuake, we have the Tai Hawauru debate with the Māori parties, Debbie Ngarua Paka, Labour's Soraya Peke-Mason and National's Harete Hipango. And then on Thursday, it's our Māori policy debate. We have Labour's Willie Jackson, the Māori party's Taukita Ferris, the Green Party's Marama Davidson, the National Party's Tama Pōtaka, the ACT Party's Karen Chua, and New Zealand versus Shane Jones. I think I covered them all. Hopefully that's right. That is us for tonight. We will see you tomorrow night for the Tai Hawauru debate. Until then, ke mau, ki te turanga o te putapā te homi e, hui e, tai ki e. Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui, i tautoko.